To read her defense, she's apologized. She says, to an escalating degree over my adult life, I have eschewed my lived experience as a white Jewish child. She goes on to say her behavior is the very epitome of violence, of thievery, of appropriation, of the myriad of ways in which non-black people continue to use and abuse black identities and culture. So she's holding her hands up. But she says she blames her lies on mental health issues and trauma experienced in her early years. She doesn't say it's an excuse, but this is what she is saying led her to identify and live her adult life in this way. Do you have any sympathy for that?
No, I don't. I think the sympathy, when it comes onto these types of things with mental health crises, they're often used specifically. We see this with white aggressions and racist acts and anti-black acts and targeted violence. Mental health crises are always used in the scape of creating justification for those things. So we can't use those tropes of mental health stability, that personal healing that she has to do. That's something that's personal and should be separate from this apology. She also talks about herself being a leech, which I think, she really needs to think about that, because really at the base of it, she was a parasite, not a leech. She went into a host community and attempted to extract. And that's something, and creating victimhood and white guilt around that is not something that should be done if she is truly apologetic.
You don't believe her then? You don't believe what she's saying this is rooted in? You think it's a trope? It's
not that I don't believe it. It's that her personal healing has nothing to do with the trauma that she created and the reparations that must happen in response to that trauma. It's not about her feelings or her guilt or her victimhood. It's about what are you going to do to heal the disturbance that you created? There's an entire department that she had no part in creating, that I was there as, when, as students protested, as staff members, facilitated and faculty members organized to have the Africana Studies Department at GWU there and created. And for her to disrupt that space where for Black and Brown students in particular, as a safe space, a cultural space, as an academic excelling space, and disrupt that space, reparations is more of what we need rather than to understand her victimhood and guilt surrounding this.
So you just wanted her to come out and say sorry and leave the reasoning to a later date? Would you have been happier with that?
We need solutions. How is she going to repair? What are the reparations dealing with this? Is she talking to the school? What is happening? Is this just for her to, absolve herself and just kind of throw everything out there and then walk away from this? I don't think she's allowed to walk away from this. She, there was teaching positions, fellowships, scholarships, things that she, really took and extracted from being a quote unquote Black Latinx faculty member. Black women are only 3% of full-time faculty at degree-granting institutions in the U.S., 3%. White women are 35%. There are white people who are in Africana Studies and Black Studies departments. That's not the problem where she couldn't find space. Also, Hispanic and Latinx women are 3%. So 6%, of this whole space that she is occupying only, belongs to Black women and Latinx women. And that percentage is even smaller when we're talking about predominantly white and well-resourced institutions. So she, her apology is not what we need. It's reparations. It's a call for reparations.
Yeah. It's interesting because it has echoes of the Rachel Dolezal case, doesn't it? A white race activist who claimed to be Black. And she said too that she had an incredibly abusive childhood, horrific in fact, and her parents, her natural born parents, adopted Black children. So, and she, as the eldest child, was then forced, or you just basically had to bring them up and look after them. And she created in her own mind's eye that was her family, because it was a much happier family to be in than the one she was actually in. And she says that's where this appropriation of African American culture stemmed from for her. Again, she recognised it was wrong to other people, to outsiders looking in, but because it was so rooted in such a traumatic childhood, that was her reality. Is that a situation that you can look at and not necessarily accept, but understand?
Well, the situation is, are you then trying to create a circumstance of power by inserting yourself amongst people who are marginalized? Because both women are walking into circumstance in which they're cis heteronormative. They are, a white, quote unquote, white presenting, if they want to be light skinned, but they're lighter skinned, but they're white presenting. They're not coming in as darker skinned black women with 4C hair, tightly textured hair. They're not coming in as queer black women. They're not coming in as disabled black women. They're coming in a specific position of quote unquote power and privilege, and they're making sure of that. So although many people have situations, personal situations in which they are subjugated within their family dynamic, or abused, or had, or experienced trauma, that trauma should not then translate into being an abuser. Trying to find power by ranking yourself as powerful and dominant in a specific situation, especially amongst people who are marginalized.
And is it because but people who are abused often turn into abusers of many kinds? Do we have to, at some point, though, understand what got them to that point? Not to excuse it, but to understand.
Well, when it comes on to systemic white supremacy, we can't then understand understand the individuality of every single situation as white fragility or white victimhood. There needs, in an apology, you're also attempting to repair, and you're taking ownership. So that does not mean that you then say, this was my life, this is the reason why I'm acting the way I am, or this is the way that I am, the reason why I'm victimizing this specific group who has been marginalized and victimized systemically for centuries. That's white supremacy. That is not something that I or anyone should be aligned with someone who experienced something personally bad and individually bad, and then that should translate into racist, anti-Black, and targeted acts of violence against Black people or Black and brown POC. Specifically, as much as if we're talking about Jessica Krug, she created an identity that said that she was a child of the hood, that her parents were struggling with drug addictions, that she was abused, that she was from the Bronx, and that she was Afro-Latina. And so with that, she's also feeding into stereotypical tropes about Black people.
Well, listen, we will have to leave it there, Lisa, but I hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for your take on that very, very interesting story, and I'm sure we will hear more from Jessica Krug as she explains her side of it, maybe a little bit more. Lisa Betty there, historian and writer in Africana Studies at Fordham University in New York.